Drahí priatelia, každý jeden životný príbeh, ktorý predstavíme v našej relácii Spojený oceánom, je rovnako vzácny, pretože je výnimočný. Dnes mám však radosť, že opäť mám vzácneho hostia, and I will switch into English right now to welcome my honorary guest, Mr. Joe Senko. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here with you.
Oh, it's very nice for me to have you here in this interview. We are in Mount Lebanon near Pittsburgh,
yes.
And we're going to introduce your life story a little, and we always start in the childhood. So I would like to invite you to first make the connection of your family history to the USA and to Slovakia.
Well, my parents came from eastern Slovakia. First, my dad came. He was about 25 years old, and he came back in the 1900s when a lot of Slovak immigrants came to the United States, and he came to Pittsburgh because of the steel mills, and he actually lived within walking distance to the steel mills. And then probably about 4 years later, one of his friends at the steel mill had a sister in the same town in eastern Slovakia, Sečovce, which is in Trebišov. And she was by 21 when she came, and maybe within 6 months they married. And they had 7 children.
Wonderful.
And I'm the baby. Actually, when I was born, my dad was 50 years old, and my mother was 42.
You were the 7th one, right?
7th one.
Beautiful.
Several of those they lost. We had 2 sons were John. They had one, and they lost, and then they had another son that was John. So I had Andrew, Michael, Sister Mary, and then we lost 2 Johns and an Ann even before I was born. But I was the only one who went to college. They worked in the steel mills, and because they came back in the 1900s, they had a strong Slovak traditions they brought with them. I know my mother is responsible for my strong religious background, and my dad was very hardworking. When he came home from the steel mills, he never just sat down. He just worked in the yard. He had a strong work ethic, and that carried on to me from my dad, and then from my mother, the religious background she gave me. In fact, I didn't show you this, but ora laborat, work and pray.
That's amazing. So you always have to think about that.
Saint Benedict, but it is, my dad taught me. Even when he was 65 and could have retired from the steel mill, he worked until he died when he was 72. He was working in the yard when he just died. But I remember
very impressive.
My mother, when I was just a little baby, they didn't speak English until television came out, then they started learning English, so we spoke Slovak at home. But I remember her teaching me prayers, and we had night prayers. And I was just very little, and we would kneel by the bed. She would kneel by bed with me and help me with the Oče náš, ktorý si na nebesiach. And sometimes I was so little, I would fall asleep, and she would pick me up and put me in the bed.
I think that's the nicest prayer of a child falling asleep by praying and
every night
to God.
I remember the night prayers. She always made sure that I knew the words to the Oče náš.
It's very beautiful.
Yeah, she had a strong religious background. And then, even though it was a Slovak and Polish neighborhood, but we didn't, the church wasn't that close. It was, the Slovak church was maybe 2-3 miles away. So we would take a trolley to church, but I went to a small Slovak Catholic school. We only had 100 students in the entire 8 grades, so it was not very big. But I know the church, we had 3, it was a small church, but we had 3 Slovak priests. We had the pastor and we had 2 assistants. But the homily was always in Slovak and the gospel. So it was very strong religious and strong Slovak church.
That sounds like very nice and very many memories that you have.
Yes.
I would like to ask you if your parents ever told you stories about their home country and about their way here. Like, do you know all those stories?
They didn't give me too much. Particularly my dad was very quiet. he didn't speak much, but I think it's because he didn't have a command of the English language. So he was a very quiet man. But my mom would reminisce about her living there, how she had a boyfriend she left and had to come here, and her brother, sent her here, and how she had a stepmother, it wasn't her real mother. So she would every once in a while talk about her life in Slovakia, about how different it was than it is when it was in the United States. So yes, so they didn't reminisce too much, but they did. She did.
Did they ever have a chance to go back to Slovakia?
Never. My parents never went back, and when they always talked about how it was there, and when I went back the first time in 1995, it was so totally different from what I was expecting, because they had maybe no electricity, or they had dirt roads and the things that had long since gone, because they were there in the early 1900s, and I went almost 1995, almost to the year 2000. So
you
much
went back
had
to a different country, to a country
totally
where
different.
They lived in.
And after that, I thought about that, because so many people, since I'm the honorary consul, would call me before they were going back to Slovakia to see their relatives for the first time. They would say, well, should I take them baseball caps or T-shirts or nylon stockings? And I'm saying, they have Tesco. Just give them money. They can buy all that there. You don't have to take it from the United States to give to them. It's available now. It's not like the old days.
I think it was a valuable advice that you were able to give them.
Yes. Or cell phones. You have better cell phones and more cell phones than we have here. Everybody has a cell phone there.
Yeah. Time always change, right?
Definitely.
And countries develop.
And it's westernized to a certain extent, but I think, you don't have, I don't know how long you've been touring the United States, but you'll notice a lot of our women, or even me, are heavy. Well, you don't see that in Slovakia, because everybody doesn't jump in the car like here. And if you go to a restaurant, there's so much food, and you just don't waste it. You eat it, and then it shows gradually. So it's a little different as far as the customs, eating and driving and walking, exercising. So.
Mr. Senko, you already mentioned that you're honorary consul.
Yes.
But also, I would like to mention several other things that I know from your life, because when we speak about how Slovakia has developed throughout the years, we sometimes do not realize there were many, many people like you that helped the country from abroad. And one of the things that we can mention, among many, many others, is the collection of the computers that you mentioned to us. I would like to tell the story here, because it's very fascinating to me.
Yes, well, I formed, to help, I couldn't do things myself, I formed the Western Pennsylvania Slovak Cultural Association to make the maybe second, third generation aware of what it's like. So we have events every month to acquaint them of things that happen over there. But I had some projects that I thought about after visiting there as to what they need. And one of my projects, this was probably back in 2001, it took about 4 years, I started collecting computers, but they had very few computers there. In fact, the ones they had were so antiquated. So we had so many here that people were just discarding just because they're not the latest version. So I had gotten a room, and we rented a truck and went around to universities, banks, and picked up all of their old computers. So at one point I had like 800 computers, every brand and every size. And then I had to hire someone to fix them and pick out the best. So I went on Slovak radio and asked for money, and everyone was happy to give me money. So I used that to hire someone to pick out the best, to upgrade them, buy parts, and clean them off from whatever was on. So at one point I had 250 computers, all the same type, IBMs. And then I went over to Slovakia to find a place where I could store them and have people pick them up. So there was a place, a school in Bratislava, that agreed that they would keep them in their gymnasium. And then after I shipped them, to ship them, I had to get money from U.S. Steel Košice. They paid for the shipment, which was it was a container of maybe 40 foot. It cost, at that time, $5,000. So they gave me the money. And then I went back over there to make sure they were not just gathering dust or that they weren't selling them. And they notified all the schools, and each school came and picked up 5 or 10. They came from far as Košice. I know the seminary came and got, I think, 10 or 15. So we got rid of all 250. And it was, I felt great because it was upgrading. It was before the computers were very popular. So I got a lot of thank you letters. It was 43 different schools that shared these computers. So it was one story I recall. When I went back the final time to make sure the computers were all gone, the school itself kept, I think, 15. And they had some of the handicapped children demonstrate use of them. And there were several young boys in wheelchairs showing me how they're working on the computers. And there was a young girl. She was, I don't know, maybe 9, 10, but she had no arms. They put the keyboard on the floor, and she worked it with her toes. It was just that one picture was worth all the work for those 4 years. To see someone like that with a big smile using a computer with their toes. It was great.
It's very moving.
Yes,
very,
it was.
very moving.
Yeah.
And especially when you do projects like this, you can see that it's not about some numbers or figures. It's about real people you helped.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's fascinating and very rewarding, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Now you have just as many computers and companies over there. You don't need that anymore. But back then, it was a definite need to help students to progress and learn about computers.
There are several different needs that we all have, and they are various. And one of them is definitely also our spiritual need and our hunger for God. And I know, apart from being present in all the unities, I know you are also an Eucharist minister.
Yes.
So I would like to ask you about this experience, because that's a different kind of service, and it must be also very, very moving to realize that you can bring Christ to people.
Yes. I don't know if you're familiar with the corporal works of mercy. Visit the sick is one of them. And there are many people that can't get out to go to church to receive the Eucharist. So we take it to them. Now, I started having 4 places to stop, but because all of these people are in poor health, I only have 1 left. They either died or went to nursing homes. But they wait for me to come because that's that opportunity 1 day a week to receive the Eucharist. I read them the gospel. We pray together. And it only takes a few minutes, but it's very rewarding for them as well as me. For a while, I was also doing it at the hospital. One day a month, I would go from room to room where there were Catholics, and a little bit sometimes disappointing because they're in the hospital because they're having an operation or they're not in good health, but yet someone would say, no, I don't want to receive the Eucharist. And it would shock me. But everybody is not the same type of Catholic, or strong Catholic or weak Catholic, or maybe
it's a really,
Catholic
really
in
a
name
gift.
only.
Yeah,
So,
I think to feel loved towards the, we can say, mystery of Eucharist, it's a real gift. I think it's
yes,
grace.
yes,
So
certainly.
It's very nice that you do have this gift and grace. And I know we could speak for hours about all the projects that you have been involved in, but I would like to focus also on one project that is very, very important in life, and that's a family. Because I would like to say that you had 6 children.
We had 6 children, and in a short period of time, my wife was from Slovakia also, and as soon as she graduated high school, we got married. So I was a father halfway through the university, and we had
Beautiful.
6 children in 13 years. So it was very, very close, and it was a little difficult. I would not recommend it because it was a financial burden at a young age. So I had a lot of times 2 jobs to make things, but gradually I became successful. I'm a certified public accountant, so I had my own business for about 25 years, and I was able to take the children to many conventions as accountants. I know we took the whole family to Bermuda and St. Thomas and many cities. It was kind of a combination. It was business because the convention of accountants, and at the same time I had my family.
It was a nice combination.
Yes, it was great. They enjoyed it, and they'll never forget it. And some of them imitate me with their family, with my grandchildren. I have 8 grandchildren, so they go on vacation to some of the same areas along the shore. And I just had my son just came back last week with his children in Florida, and it was actually in the same area where I had a home for a while in Florida. So my wife wants to this summer go to where I used to take the children every year to the shore in New Jersey. So I think I left good memories with them, and they are repeating what they enjoyed.
That must be very rewarding too, to see that what you invested into bringing them up, you can see it now.
Oh, yeah.
And although you said it was also a huge struggle, even 6 children themselves are a huge struggle, I would say. But anyway, I'm sure it was also a wonderful adventure for you as a father and as a husband. I would like to ask you, after all those years, what would you say that is important in bringing children up?
Well, you've got to give them good examples, so that, like, I received good examples from my parents. You know, the work ethic from my dad, and my mom give me a strong religious background. So I do the same thing automatically with the children. I brought them up, made sure they all had good education. All 6 of them went to universities. In fact, my one daughter has a master's degree, and then she went on to a doctorate degree. So they all did well in school, and I think that helps them in raising their family and raising their grandchildren. So they're just following my footsteps.
And this is the time when I would like to ask you also about your wife, because I know you met her as a beautiful young lady.
Yes, she was.
And you've been together for how many years, please?
It'll be 63 years we've been married. We've known each other. She was 16 and I was 17. So it's what, 66 years or so? Yeah.
It's breathtaking, really. So
it is. Well, we've had some bad times, but we stayed together.
I guess.
Oh, definitely. Not that many years you have to get. It was perfect for all those years.
So that's also a good inspiration for me to ask you about marriage, because every marriage has bad times, I guess.
Yes.
What is important? I asked you about your children. Now I would like to ask you about your wife and your marriage. What is important to keep the marriage going?
Well,
for so many years.
It's like patience. I prayed to St. Jerome for anger management every day because I lose my temper sometimes. And then I realized I shouldn't. I should be more patient with Albina. Now she loves to read, and now she can't read because of macular degeneration. She loved to go with me everywhere, and now she has arthritis, so she has difficulties. So I've got to be more patient with her, and I catch myself frequently not being patient, and I feel sorry for it. But the one thing, and I always tell my children too, don't go to bed angry. You make up and forget about it and start the next day all over as if the past is gone and start fresh again.
That's actually from the Bible, and it's one of the
Yes.
amazing pieces of advice for us from the Holy Scripture. Speaking about vacations, let's speak also about your connection to Slovakia, because I know that's a place where you go a lot, and not only as yourself, but you also organize tours for other people.
Yes, I've done that. Well, this August will be the 14th tour I'm taking. Now, many times I take about 25, 30. One year I had 62. I had 2 buses. They were mostly U.S. Steel women working there. They had a society that they socialized every month. And this one year they decided to go to Košice, but we had a tour. That was my largest. Now, I have this coming August, I have 40 going with me I'm going to Slovakia, and I'll spend 2 days in Poland and 2 days in Hungary. So I think it's popular because we're going to see 3 countries, and you only have to fly over the one time. So it's always very enjoyable. The U.S. ambassador will have us to his home, and the mayor of Prešov will have us in the offices there. They have a celebration for us because Pittsburgh is sister city with Prešov.
I've never known this, so that's what does it mean?
Well, there are many cities. They're a sister city with not just the United States, but they might be sister city with other countries. They have a city, and they just exchange their similarities, and they visit each other. Because I think Prešov is sister city with cities in other countries.
Okay.
But we are the only one in the United States. You take one city from each country where you could be a sister city. And you have some similarities, and you visit each other and exchange information.
That's very practical and very inspiring for the citizens themselves.
Yeah, Pittsburgh has probably, I think, 14 sister cities with like someone in China, someone Ireland, just different countries they'll pick.
We're near Pittsburgh. We're in the state of Pennsylvania, which probably has the biggest number of people with Slovak origin.
Correct, yeah. The U.S. Census says Pennsylvania is number 1, and metropolitan Pittsburgh is number 1 as far as a city. Cleveland, the city of Cleveland is number 1, but if you take the surrounding areas, Pittsburgh is number 1. We have over 100,000.
What do you think helped people that came here and lived through some difficult times?
Well, I think they came here for jobs. We had the steel mills, which employed at that time many people, and then we also had the coal mines. I know Albina's dad worked both in the coal mines for a while, then he worked in the steel mills. My family, not only my dad, but both my brothers worked in the steel mills. So it was a good source of employment because, especially during the war, they needed a lot of steel and for the war effort, but also we were competitive price-wise and quality-wise. It was before there were a lot of imports. So it was a very good source of employment.
Mr. Senko, we have the last minute of our show right now.
Okay.
So I'd like to ask you, is there anything you would like to say as your personal message to people living in Slovakia? Because you have not only the connection to Slovakia, but you've done so many things for Slovakia, for Slovak culture, for preservance of Slovak culture and religion here. If you should say something to people living in Slovakia, what would it be?
Well, I think they should come for a visit, whether they have relatives here or not, because there's so much to see, no matter what city. In Pittsburgh, we have the Warhol Museum, which a lot of Slovaks that visit me want to see. We have what we call the nationality rooms. They're classrooms. Each classroom is made by a different country, the architects and the materials. So that's very interesting to see. We have the Pittsburgh Agreement, which was signed here to help form Czechoslovakia back in 1918. We just celebrated the 100th anniversary of the signing. So we have that museum to see. So there's so much to see, not even just Slovak. We have a great zoo, we have a great aviary, great science center, and most big cities have that. So you don't have to just come to Pittsburgh, come anywhere in the United States, and you really enjoy yourself and become more educated and more knowledgeable about United States before you go back.
That's a very nice message, and so was the whole interview with you. I would like to thank you for that.
Great.
The time
I
is
enjoyed
always...
it.
I'm very glad. The time is always short, but I'm sure that if anybody would like to know more about the work of my valuable guests, they can read about you and everything that has been done in the USA for Slovaks. Chcem aj vám veľmi pekne poďakovať za pozornosť a poslať vám srdečné pozdravy z Pittsburghu z Pensylvánie.